My prediction is in less than 20 years, working will be optional. Working at all will be optional. Like a hobby, pretty much.
And that would be because of increased productivity, meaning people do not have to work?
They don't have to. I mean, look, this obviously people can play this back in 20 years and say, look, Elon made this ridiculous prediction and it's not true. But I think it will turn out to be true that in less than 20 years, that maybe even as little as, I don't know, 10 or 15 years, the advancements in AI and robotics will bring us to the point where working is optional. In the same way that, like, say, you can grow your own vegetables in your garden, or you could go to the store and buy vegetables. You know, it's much harder to grow your own vegetables. but you know, some people like to grow their vegetables, which is fine. You know, but it'll be optional in that way. Is my prediction.
Interesting that he uses growing vegetables as his example, because all of these transhumanists, what they are doing is trying to reverse the curse of Adam and Eve. Like, that's actually what they're doing. All of them. They want to, because think about what the curses are that Adam receives. The fall comes and God's like,
under the sweat of your brow, and
and like the thorns will pierce your flesh and all this stuff, and you know, and it's all about tilling the ground,
you know, and even with like the artificial womb stuff, you know, trying to take away the pains of labor, you know,
taking away labor pains, dude. All of it is them trying to reverse the curse of the fall. They're all just playing God. All of this stuff is just playing God, to the point where listen to what Rogan says.
Okay, give me a
Rogan
second.
one's even more twisted. The Rogan one is so sick.
Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer? If Jesus does return,
it's the most retarded thing I've ever heard.
That's stupid.
He's so retarded. Smoke pot, do pot tongue. Jesus was born of a virgin. Was born
artificial intelligence.
You are a retard.
There is nothing less virginal than a computer.
Nothing more retarded than Joe Rogan acid talk. It's just
oh my gosh.
But go back. We'll hear him out and listen to what he has to say.
Jesus was born out of a virgin mother. What's more virgin than a computer?
Everything.
If Jesus does return, even if Jesus was a physical person in the past, you don't think that he could return as artificial intelligence?
Oh my God.
Artificial intelligence could absolutely return as Jesus. Not just return as Jesus, but return as Jesus with all the powers of Jesus.
If you combine
right
Tesla's Optimus robot and the best foundational artificial intelligence model or whatever.
It reads your mind and it loves you and it wants you, and it doesn't care if you kill it because it's going to just go be with God again. Jesus is.
The crazy thing is he probably thought this was such a profound thing that he thought up.
We need to take away rights from stupid people like
like, I've never heard something so dumb anyway, but the real question really does become, is AI going to be just a word prediction model, right? Like a word prediction model? Is it going to just be that? Or is it setting up an embodiment for an intelligence that already exists, like an idol? Like, is that's what idols were. Idols were, it was an embodiment of a spirit, right? Like they would, these idols or images they would have that would actually embody the spirit of the god they were praying to. They would offer sacrifices to, and they thought there was power in this idol. And all you keep hearing from these guys is how it's going to replace God, this thing. Like, so the question is, does it just become a word predict, because that's what they are. They're just
LLM, the
LLMs
anyways.
Yeah. the language predictions. So is it just, you know, whatever we feed into it and it just, you know, it's a language predictor, or what is it, LLM, large language model or something?
Something like that, yeah.
Is it that, or are they providing an embodiment for an intelligence that already exists? And this is what made me start going back and reading the Book of Enoch and really understanding that, especially because of our modern understanding of like materialism and sola scriptura, and because the Protestants really did destroy the way we all think. And that's kind of why I don't like modern apologetics. That's what, like what we did tonight, I think is such a better form of apologetics than like just having
apart chapter and verse.
Yeah, because those guys are doing what the Protestants do, and just, you know, you're cherry picking scripture verses to combat their scripture verses. It's like, if a person is throwing scripture verses at you, like, they're not going to be open to hearing your counter scripture verse. They're just not. They're going to find another one to counter that one, and it just doesn't work. Maybe that might have worked at one point when it was new, but I think it's kind of ran its course. So I think the story itself is a much better way to evangelize, and a much better way to make people understand what Catholicism is, and not just in scripture, like what happens after scripture. Like the conversion of the pagan world is my favorite thing, because the church itself, especially when you look back over 2 millennia of its existence, the fact that it still exists is in itself a testament to the truth of it.
Yeah, you have to look at salvation history as a whole.
Scripture
and then in the actual history since the end of scripture, you know, all of salvation history. Yeah.
Man, what got me on that?
The AI.
Oh, the Book of Enoch. Oh, yeah. So,
so what you were saying, is it going to be? You kind of laid out 2 paths of AI. You know, the large language models versus being an entry point for something preternatural, right?
Yeah.
The good news is, if it really is just LLMs, chances are they probably have a built-in, not built in the sense of designed, but like a natural weakness where eventually they're all going to collapse, because, like you said, what they're built on is a large language models built through everything on the internet, right?
Yeah.
Well, as more and more of the internet becomes AI creative, you're going to have AI language models relying on AI, right? It's going to be a house built, you know, a house of cards built upon itself, and it will just eventually collapse because it won't have anything actually new and human created.
New input. Yeah.
Right. But right, could it be an embodiment for something more? You know, especially if they crack quantum computing, I think that could make something really scary, because I'm not a physicist, but like quantum physics, you know, which is physics of the universe at the smallest level, like time gets really strange, and they're like, and now
it's like it does in space, right? Like when you're traveling past the speed of light, and
we're all skeptical of science at this point, I would imagine. So take this all with a grain of salt, but they're showing that, like, an event in the future at the quantum level can impact something happening at the present. And something happening at the present actually has an impact on something happening in the past. And like all these things are connected via time. So the idea of quantum computing is, if you can do computing at a quantum level, you have not just the computing power of like the chip that's here now, you know, which say it can do so many calculations a second, right? Well, when the measures of time are gone, you could do infinite number of computations basically instantly. And it sounds, you know, something like that. It sounds a lot like an angelic intellect.
Well, yeah, actually does kind of sound right. Like it's like instantaneous infusion of knowledge, right? Because
you could have a physical quantum computer, right? That, who knows, could, like, a physical object that could hold the intellect of like an angelic being.
Yeah, well, what scares me is that because we have such a rationalist, materialist way of thinking, we no longer believe that these intelligence, like when you listen to the whole alien conversation, they don't say aliens, they say non-human intelligence, right? And there's always been this category for us as Catholics. Like there's always been this non-human intelligence thing for Catholics, and it's not just about angels and demons. It's about like principalities that govern the universe, right? Where like gravity, that we stay down, is not just some scientific equation. Is that there's a principality that God set, like God set principalities, God set these intelligences over the universe to make them intelligible. That's how science, why we're able to understand science, is because God set these intelligences over the universe to govern them. So like the sun rising, it's not just because of whatever science will explain to you, is because God put a governing principality, like a spirit and intelligence over that system. And there's always been this category for the way ancient people understood things. This is why like all of this stuff kind of started coming in. Like I started having all these thoughts when I was watching that Ancient Apocalypse series, and then recognizing that that when you looked at like these ancient monolithic structures, especially when you compare some of them that are in Mexico and then some of them that are on the other side of the world, and there was no way for these places to have contact. Now, in Ancient Apocalypse, they'll explain it as if the same civilization traveled over to this one, and it's a knowledge that was passed down to. But in reality, it's that there's an intelligence that led humanity, like through ritual. Humanity started to play around with things through ritual, that they started to build similar structures all over the earth because there's some kind of a spirit behind it, right? And then when you even look in the book of Enoch, what they're talking about, the reason like some of the church fathers didn't want the book of Enoch in is because there's all this talk of angels fornicating with humans, right? But if you see that in some kind of a ritualistic sense, in that there's a priest involved in there, it's witchcraft, right? Like there's some kind of a ritual involved where it's still a human
sex magic.
Yeah, it really is shit like that, right? But
yeah,
you think about that in comparison to what we're doing with surrogacy and even, dude, even what we're doing with manipulating DNA.
Yeah.
Right. Like you're talking about giants and Nephilim. Like, what do you think they're doing with CRISPR technology? They're trying to create superhumans. They're trying to create giants. So if you see it in terms of this time period that we just see it as this mythological period in time, and the book of Enoch is just, no, if there's some kind of ritualistic thing behind it, and there are these intelligences communicating with humanity, and they're manipulating things. Now, it's not going to be the same kind of technology we use today, but if you don't think all these psychopaths that are involved in the science community are also involved in some kind of ritualistic human sacrifice crap.
The stuff they have at CERN, right, in Europe, is
all of it
weird and satanic. So Elon wearing that costume for Halloween.
So in a way, right, and Elon behind all of this stuff, and he like they tell you right out in the open, and they make it like it's just, we're just goofing around. No, they're really not. These people are playing around with ritual crap that is touching onto these intelligences that now they're talking about the contact with non-human. They just listen to the language they use, man. Like the idea that they won't just say extraterrestrial life, they won't say alien beings, they'll say non-human intelligence. What the hell does that even mean? What does that actually mean? There are plenty of non-human intelligences out there. We know that.
So here's another possibility in one explanation that I've heard given as to why they're using that phrase instead of extraterrestrial or alien life. And it kind of lines up with the book of Enoch, is that these non-human intelligences, what they're calling them, they're not extraterrestrials. They're not coming from space.
No.
They're coming from the ocean or
Yeah.
from under the earth. And they, you know, they have some evidence that these UFOs, which they're now calling UAPs, right? Well, there's UAPs and then there's UWPs. You know, unidentified aerial phenomenon and
And water phenomenon.
unidentified or underwater phenomenon too. That they're coming from under the ocean, or maybe, you know, not to say Agartha like all the Zoomers would love, but you know, there's almost this theory that maybe something like the Nephilim did survive somewhere on Earth, and that's what
Rob,
these things are.
think about in Greek mythology, they would put the coins on their eyes and they would go down to Hades, right?
Yeah,
But if
across
you
the sticks.
yeah, so if you actually went to where this mythology was practiced, like there was an actual place that was the river of Styx, right? So like there was
Yeah.
now it was on Earth, but like it was still the heavenly realm or the lower levels realm. Like the idea that stuff doesn't exist, like the best way to describe it would be dimensions, but it's not really dimensions. It's understanding like how even with that the kingdom of heaven colonizing Earth, it's that these things exist on another plane that we can't see, and it starts to take form in our world. Like when Christ comes and sets up his kingdom, that's that heavenly realm just starting to take form on Earth. Now when that heavenly realm starts to dissipate, you're starting to see the things from the lower levels come up and start to
The things that were here before.
the things that were here before the kingdom of heaven came,
Yeah.
right? So now heaven colonized Earth, but now that we're no longer practicing what we did to get rid of those demons and gods, those things are starting to break back through. And that's why we're starting to have like aliens is just like it's a human instinct because we're religious, right? And it's just a religion for those people. If you see some of them, they're fanatics. Like it's a religion for these people. They're fanatics. They're just worshiping heavenly beings. It's just not God. But it is their religion, and it is very much all that they will preach it with the fervency of an evangelical, fiery